your feet are standing right now within the gates of the city of Jerusalem. Just by looking right now at the eastern walls of the city, you're right now standing looking westward. That is north, that is south behind us, and behind you will be the eastern part. So as you look at the eastern walls of the city, just in the middle, you can see double arches. It's a closed gate. One out of 9 gates which we have in the city of Jerusalem. We call it the Judgment Gate, the Golden Gate, or the Gate of Mercy. It was known as the Mount of Olives or Galilee. This area was called Galilee 2,000 years ago. You're looking at the city of Jerusalem in front of you. The high buildings which you see in the horizon, not that accurate, more or less, that is the line which separates and divides Jerusalem today into 2 sectors, Western and Eastern. It's a political division basically. 1948, Israel captured the western part. The 6 Days War in 1967, Israel captured the eastern part, and that's why we call it Eastern and Western. You see the smoke coming from there?
Yeah.
Jesus stood where we are right now and did just what I'm doing right now to his disciples. He told them, you see the smoke coming from there? They said yes. He told them, that is where hell is going to be. And then when you go all the way to the city of Jerusalem, you have to go on. Jerusalem is built over 3 valleys. The first valley, which is straight down below us right now, to the left of it, on the left side of it, just where it's going to disappear, there's like a big complex built on the rock. And if you really concentrate, you can see on the right side of it like 5 windows or 5 arches. Can you see it? That is the place which is called the potter's field, the blood field. That is where Judas Iscariot hanged himself at. But when we talk about the valleys, which cross Jerusalem from the north to the south, the first of them, which we call the Judgment, starts at your hotel and ends all the way down where you can see that monastery. The second valley, today, it goes all the way through the heart of the city which is in front of us, through the heart of the old city of Jerusalem. If you look at the Golden Dome, Dome of the Rock, to the left of it you can see that little black dome, which is of the Aqsa Mosque, just to the left of the Golden Dome. Behind these 2 domes, that is where we have the one which have been called 2,000 years ago by the name, the Valley. Today we call it Tyropia. Let me go on and set up for you where you are. Earlier, when we have been there, at a place where at one time Solomon have went on and placed idols for all the wives he had. You remember how many wives he had? A lot of them were foreigners. So therefore, when they came over here, not only that he went on and built the temple to God, but he went on and built many temples on the top of Mount of Olives for the different gods where his wives were worshipping. Where we are right now, today known as the Mount of Olives, Mount Scopus, and we have another ridge which we call it the Mount of Evil Consolidation, believed to be the place where Judas Iscariot met the high priest Annas and agreed to betray Jesus. When I say Judas Iscariot, I'm talking about a disciple who was not a Galilean but from Jerusalem. That's where his name comes from, Judas Iscariot, Iscariot. Ish means man. Krayot used to be the southern suburbs of Jerusalem, and that's where Judas comes from. That's the only disciple which we know about that he was not a Galilean and was a zealot. The highest point of the mountain is where the Lutheran hospital is standing today, and that's about 2,642 feet above sea level. Where you are is about 2,400 feet above sea level, and the third ridge is approximately 2,100 feet above sea level. We come to the Mount of Olives. There's the eastern side of it, the western. Western we have Jerusalem. On the eastern side, about 400 feet away from where we are, you would find out the town called Bethphage, the house of the unripened figs, from where Jesus started his Palm Sunday walk. And then you would walk another 200-300 feet away from it, and you would get yourself into the ancient town of Bethany, the hometown of Lazarus. We know that Bethany used to be 0.75 of a mile from the walls of the city, because that is what we call a Sabbath walking distance. The Jews had their laws in relation to the Sabbath, the seventh day of the week, where usually it would start with sunset and ends with sunset. When they can see the first star, that's the beginning of it. Within a walled city, you can walk as much as you want. Outside the walled city, there's a distance. Look at the modern city of Jerusalem today. The Orthodox Jews went on and they have surrounded it, the whole thing, with one continuous wire or line to make it as a one unit so they can walk as much as they want during a Sabbath. Because today when you come to the city of Jerusalem, which is 6 by 6 miles, all right, that's excluding the valleys and the hills which are within it, that's quite a big city. But what I wanted over here to point out that we are right now in the vicinity of Bethany. Why so? Because simply enough, when we go on and talk about the ascension of Jesus, the Bible have described it to have taken place in the vicinity of Bethany, not mentioning a name. Matthew himself goes on and he said that Jesus have met his disciples in a high place in Galilee. Now we don't really know if he referred to this Galilee where we are or to Mount Tabor or some other high mountains which have been in the Galilee up north. But all the other disciples, when they talk about the ascension of Jesus, they would have went on placing it to have took place down in the vicinity of Bethany. There's a beautiful description of the ascension of Jesus mentioned in the book of Acts chapter 1, and starting from verse 7 it says, "He said to them, 'It is not for you to know the times or dates the Father has set by his own authority, but you will receive power when the Holy Spirit comes on you, and you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem and in all Judea and Samaria, and to the ends of the earth.' After he said this, he was taken up before their very eyes, and the cloud hid him before their sight. They were looking intently into heaven as he was going, when suddenly 2 men dressed in white stood beside them. 'Men of Galilee,' they said, 'why do you stand here looking into the sky? The same Jesus who has been taken from you into heaven will come back in the same way you have seen him go to heaven. Then the Lord will go out and fight against all nations, as he fights in the day of battle. On that day, his feet will stand on the Mount of Olives, east of Jerusalem, and the Mount of Olives will be split into two from east to west, forming a great valley with half of the mountain moving north and half moving south. On that day, there will be no light, no cold or frost. It will be a unique day, without daytime or nighttime, a day known to the Lord. When evening comes, there will be light. On that day, living water will flow out from Jerusalem, half to the eastern sea, that is the Dead Sea, and half to the western sea, and that is the Mediterranean. The Lord will be king over the whole earth. On that day, there will be only one Lord, and his name, the only name." The first reading was Acts. The second reading was taken from the book of Zechariah, chapter 14, where simply enough Zechariah goes on and talks about the first and the second coming of Christ, and he specifically goes on and places it to be on the Mount of Olives. Today, all the way from Mount Scopus, as far as Hebron, 20 miles away from where we are southward, we have what we call the watershed point. Whenever it rains, part of the water runs westward and part of it eastward, but only in winter time. At the end of the world, the prophecy talks about living water flowing down eastward and westward, both in winter and summertime, where the Dead Sea will be a living water, and that will be one of the signs for the second coming, where later on we're going to go and try to link it also to Matthew chapter 6, 7, and 24, where we have the signs about the end of the world. So here's another reference from the Old Testament, which has to do with the Mount of Olives, because from where he was taken, he'll be brought down again. Now, where did he go? They saw him going up. Of course, at that time, the people who lived thought that that's where heaven is, straight above us. They thought that that's a solid surface. When you hear about the clouds open or heavens open, all right, they thought about solid surface. Of course, today we know it is not so. And Jesus cannot be in orbit today going all the way around if he would have went straight up. So heaven should be somewhere else, somewhere in this universe, over there. Christians came, venerated the place. The mother of Constantine, Helena, Queen Helena, Saint Helena, when she made her journey to Jerusalem in 324 AD, the first place she went on, the first thing she did, asking for the holy sites, and then she contributed money for the building of 3 churches, which we know about. Holy Sepulchre, Nativity, and the place called Olivet, 100 feet away from where we are, where she went on combining 2 traditions, Ascension and the teachings of Jesus, plus the teaching of the prayer of our Father. Up till today, we still have a convent, a Carmelite convent, 100 feet away from where we are. We're going to it next. But later on, 375 AD, we had a pilgrim by the name of Pelagia who said, that is not the place of the ascension. It should be the highest point. And she came and she built over here a cylindrical church, which used to be roofless, to show the ascension. All the churches in the Holy Land, excluding one, which is the Nativity, were leveled down by the Persians. The Crusaders, they would be the next group to come and rebuild. And we're talking about the 12th century AD. 199 to 1187 here in Jerusalem. And what you're seeing around you today is basically Crusader. That's the remains of their hexagonal church which have stood over here. That chapel is Crusader, excluding the dome, which have been added by the Muslims later on, because also this one used to be roofless. Today, you're looking at a chapel which is 800 years old. Later on, you can go around it. Look at some of the capitals from outside. You're able to see a carving of a griffin. You might read in books it's a phoenix, all right, like phoenix rising up from the ashes, but it's a griffin. Why griffin? Because in Babylon, the Babylonians and the Persians consider the griffin as the guardians of heaven. So, and Jesus went to heaven, he's the guardian of heaven, so therefore the closest to symbolize is the griffin, taking it out of ancient sources. It's a Muslim shrine, not a Christian today. From all the shrines, Muslims made their way in over here, they took over. There are, of course, certain status quo which allows Christians to come in. That's what explains all these iron hooks around you. Here's the Catholic tent usually. Usually there will be a Catholic tent during the Feast of the Ascension. Next to it will be Ethiopian, Coptic, Syriac Orthodox, Greek Orthodox, Armenian Orthodox. And all of them will be praying one next to another. They try to chant and compete one with another, and their chanting turns into shouting and screaming. But this is the flavor of celebrating a feast in the Holy Land over here. As long as they don't start knocking each other, which used to happen 100 years ago, not anymore. So that's over here the spirit, but it is a Muslim chapel. And the reason for this, because the Muslims believe that this is the place where the Christ will come back. But when he come back, he's going to go and break up the cross, this idol which Christians worship. And they will go on and spread Islam as a universal religion. That's the difference. Inside the chapel, we're going to take you in and show you a rock, which for the first time we hear about it was by the Crusaders. They took a footprint from here down to the Dome of the Rock. The Muslims, when they came back in power, they took the footprint out of the Dome of the Rock and back over here. And we'll take you in and show you over there a footprint where, according to the traditions, it is the left footprint of the Lord Jesus Christ. This, I have no comments about it. Usually I leave it to the faith of the people, which could lead them. Remember one thing in the Holy Land. Many places, we have beautiful churches, but many places try to see through your heart and not eyes. That was a very big help. I learned that from a blind lady. All right? Now, we're coming over here to a complex where we had a group of French people from the Louvre. Those of you who have been in France, Paris, all right? I think all of us are familiar with the name Louvre. They came over here and they were the one who went on working on the restoration of this church where we are right now. Basically, the foundations of the church which you see around you, or the cloth which you see around you, are the foundation of the early basilica which was built by Queen Helena, the mother of Constantine. Down below us, we have a cave which we're going to take you in, and according to the tradition, this is the cave where Jesus taught his disciples how to pray the prayer of Our Father. This is the place which is mentioned to be on the Mount of Olives through the teachings which we hear about it in Matthew chapter 24, even in Matthew 23, where we're going to go on and refer to a certain portion of it at Dominus Flavit, all right, it would have took place anywhere between the space where we are right now down to Dominus Flavit. So notice later on the track which we're going to be walking on, that will put you within the space. Because the moment you would come through the junction, which is outside this complex, from Bethany and Bethphage, from where we are, there's no chance that you can see Jerusalem. So you have to really walk another 100 feet so you can come within a view of the city as it is described in the Gospels. But also I would like to remind you, Christianity is Judaism international. You don't have a New Testament without Old Testament. You don't have Jesus' teachings without Old Testament. Jesus didn't bring anything new. The commentary was new, but the teachings were not. Remember this, and it will be clearer and clearer through the coming 8 days. As we come right now to the place where we are, here, 2,000 years ago, this used to be a wilderness. The moment you're outside the walls of the city, You're in the wilderness. No one would have dared to leave the old city during the nights because we had lions, leopards roaming in this area, bears as well. So nobody really would have dared to go all the way outside the walls of the city 2,000 years ago. I mean, if you go with torches, usually you should be armed. And that's when we hear about Gethsemane, and Peter was armed. Because you'd never really dare to go at night outside the walls without arms on you, because you need to defend yourself against wild animals if they attack you, and against bandits. Because the moment you go all the way to the top of this hill and you start descending down into the desert, that is where the refugee place of criminals would have been. From time to time, they would have went on raiding up a group of people trying to rob them of what they had. The Good Samaritan is the best example of that. So therefore, when we talk about Jesus doing all his teachings down by the temple area, we don't hear about Jesus going into the city of Jerusalem except of the temple, and except one time where he could have met Nicodemus at a house which had been located on Mount Zion. That's the only time, other than the last 2 days of his life, that we hear about him going into the city of Jerusalem and not the temple. After all days of teaching, on the way back to Bethany, where he would have spent the night, he might have wanted to be on his own to retreat, and that's where he would have had at his hands 2 caves. One at the foot of the mountain, one at the top of the mountain where we are right now, and he used to retreat into them, pray on his own, and sometimes do some teachings around it, and these caves his disciples would be familiar with. That's why Helena, when she came and she said, this is the ascension, because they met at a place on the Mount of Olives, in the vicinity of Bethany. It should be a place which they're used to, and that's the cave which we have behind us. It's a very important cave that we had the first bishops of Jerusalem buried in them, excluding James, the first of them. All the others, according to the traditions, between the 1st century AD up to the 3rd century AD, were buried in the cave which we have down below us. Today, you're standing in a complex which is a convent. Within the convent, we have 14 nuns where you won't see any of them because it's a closed convent and it's a Carmelite one. We'll be taking you to Mount Carmel on the last day where this order was founded. Then go more in details about them. It's a Carmelite convent. This used to be the cloister of the convent where no one could have came in as well. And later, about 60 years ago, they decided to open it to the public so they can visit the holy place which we have here. That's when they purchased another piece of land at the back part of their convent, and they started retreating into it for some fresh air and sun. And this have been opened to the public. When they opened it, we had approximately the prayer of our Father in 15 languages. Today, we have it in 108 languages, and I'm very careful as I'm saying 108 because through the last month they could have added 1 or 2 more. I mean, 3 years ago, if you would be over here, it were 84 languages. Today it's 108 languages, and the 2 most important of them are the ones which are over there, of which I have the privilege of being able to speak both of them. One of them is my mother tongue, which is the Aramean, the one on the left. But when you look at that and you come to me to write Aramean, I won't write it that way. These are Hebrew alphabets. In the Galilee 2,000 years ago, they spoke Aramaic, but they used Hebrew alphabets to write it, and not what we call today Syriac alphabets. Where the word Syriac, which we're going to see the language later on, comes to mean Christian. When Christians were called Christians, the first word was Suri in Aramaic, which meant a Christian. That was the first time we were called by that name. When we come to Jesus, we know that in the Galilee, most of his teachings were done in Aramaic, and it's a must to be in Aramaic, because if you go all the way to Hebrew, it loses about 90% of the meanings in it. When you hear about the Son of God, if you go to the word the Son of God, to Hebrew, it meant nothing. Any person could be the Son of God. But when you would have went up to Aramaic and said the Son of God, it meant a lot for one reason. Daniel was written in Aramaic. And Daniel's vision of the Son of Man, talking about the Son of God, could be our reference over here to link between the two and the relation between Jesus and his Father, to be one. And that's quite important to go to it. When you go all the way to these, in which one of them did Jesus do the teaching? If it were only Galileans, Aramaic. If there were some Jews, they won't understand that much of Aramaic, so as a result of that, it could have been Hebrew, and that's why these 2 languages have been placed over there on a whiteboard, other than all the ceramics which you can see around you, where we have all the other languages, including Hebrew, Aramaic, all right, which we'll be able to see them as we go through. Before we take you down to the cave, this is over here some verses taken from the book of Proverbs. Rarely that you go to this book. And this is the reading. from chapter 30. Two things I ask you, O Lord. Do not refuse me before I die. Keep falsehood and lies far from me. Now, give me neither poverty nor riches. My daily bread. I may have too much and disown you, and say, who is the Lord? Or I may become poor and steal, and so dishonor the name of my God. You notice that? You go all the way over here in the New Testament to Matthew chapter 6, and you read over here and says, give us our daily bread. Don't give me riches, just my daily bread, so I will not dishonor you. Because when you go all the way down to the prayer of our Father and you read it, the first 3 verses are petitions which you're asking God. The others are petitions which you need to add. The other 4 petitions are petitions which you ask each other. That is basically the prayer. 7 verses, 7 petitions, 3 to God, 4 to each other. You follow them, you will not dishonor God. This is how it could have sounded. It starts بشم أبو وابنه روحه قاديشو أمين نثقاد شموخ تيث ملكوثوخ نهوى سبيونوخ أي كانوا دبشمايو أفبر عن هبلا لحمة دسم كونان يومونا وشبوكلان لو تعلم يومونو حوبين وحتو هاين العالم أفتينو وهبه لحمينو العالم علمين آمين. This is how it would have sounded in Aramaic 2,000 years ago. Not modern Aramaic, but ancient Aramaic. When you go in, look at the altar, and on the altar, you're going to see a medallion where there's going to be a rooster with opened wings and chicks underneath it. When you stand in front of the altar, you'll see on the altar a cross. Go and look through the cross, through the window, and you'll see through the cross the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. It was done on purpose. From here, Jesus could see his crucifixion place. That church looked like a teardrop because of the tears of Jesus, calling it today Dominus flavit. Flavit to weep. Dominus the dominant, the Lord wept over here. So from here, Jesus continued his Palm Sunday, and according to our traditions, of course, we do know that there was a bridge crossing the valley at the eastern gate, and he would have entered the city from the east, the temple from the eastern gate, as a fulfillment of the prophecies. We are at the place which is called the Garden of Gethsemane. There's the Garden of Gethsemane, and there's the Cave of Gethsemane, or Gethsemane itself. And they're totally 2 different things. You did pass by 8 trees, 8 olive trees, where they are 1,930 years old. But if you go to the roots of the tree itself, and the lower part of the stem, that could be more than 2,000 years old. Because originally, all this mountain was covered up with olive trees. That's why they called it the Mount of Olives. And Titus, when he came in the year 70 AD, he gave orders to chop all the trees in the vicinity of the city. But the olive tree, if you do not take it from the roots, you don't kill it. In the Galilee, we have 2 olive trees where they are 5,000 years old. Therefore, we come to this place over here. You find the Garden of Gethsemane, and the cave used to be the oil press itself. A place which had been a private spot, a private property. And we assume that the owner of this property used to be a man by the name of Lazarus. But Lazarus didn't live in Jerusalem because he was originally a leper. Jesus healed a leper in Bethany. And the Jewish law said no lepers to live within the city of Jerusalem because they would dispurify it. No lepers to live on the western side of the city because western wind will carry their touch to the temple. On the eastern side of the Mount of Olives, you have the mountain to block the eastern wind. That's why they lived in Jericho, Bethany. But Lazarus was a rich man, so why not? It could be his property. Jesus knew him. He had permission to come into this private property, and it was a known place for Jesus and his disciples. Wednesday evening, Jesus had the Last Supper, or it could be Thursday, one of the 2 days. After the Passover meal, Jesus had 11 disciples, because Judas already left. They come across the Kidron Valley, and we did some calculation, and we found it to be a full moon. There are monuments in the valley up till today to be seen, 5th century BC. Jesus passed by them, into the Garden of Gethsemane, down to the cave, where he left 8 of his disciples, and he came with 3. He left the 3, according to our tradition, somewhere here. And the 3 were the inner circle of the disciples, James, John, and Peter. And he left them to go and pray. Where did he pray? On the rock which you're sitting on. It could be here. It could be the same very rock which we have within the church, or the rock which we have on the other side of the church. Because when they came to build churches in the Byzantine period, they had to cut part of the rock out to place the foundations of the church in. So therefore, it could be there, it could be here, it could be there. But we went on, and we have selected a small piece of it which is within the church, just as a symbol. Because that is where we had first Calvary. When you would have went to walk the Via Dolorosa in the Byzantine period, that's the first station. Not anymore, of course, from the Crusader period. But Calvary is the first station of the cross. Jesus prayed 3 times in this area. Every time he was done with the portion of prayer, he came back and the disciples were asleep. Wake up, can't you be with me? Can't you stay awake? And he goes to pray. The first time he prayed for himself, asking his Father, if I can take this cup away from him, but if this is your will, thy will be done. Second Adam, correcting the mistake of the first Adam. First Adam said, I'm not willing. The second Adam comes over here, and he goes on and says, if this is your will, thy will be done. And that's why we say that salvation would start at Gethsemane, where the word Gethsemane got shaman, which means an olive press, by the way. So Jesus, when he started praying, passion, agony, he started sweating blood. That's the first place where he shed blood. From here we get the name Calvary, to this place. But not the crucifixion, of course, because that's a different spot which we have within the old city of Jerusalem today. The second prayer was for his disciples, the third one for all the believers. Then after this, Jesus wakes up the disciples, he goes back to the cave, he finds the other 8, and that would be the place where Judas would come, a place which is known to him. And he finds Jesus over there, and he comes, of course, with the chief police of the high priest, and that's where Jesus would be arrested. So we ended having the place of the arrest and the place of agony. In the Byzantine period, they built the Church of the Agony, we had the Cave of the Arrest, and we have the Church of the Assumption, all built at the same time by the same emperor, Theodosius I in 380 AD. Destroyed. Rebuilt by the Crusaders. Now when the Muslims came, they demolished this church, they caused a lot of damage for the cave, but they did not destroy the Church of the Assumption because the Muslims venerate the Virgin Mary as much as you do. Except one title, the Mother of God. Other than this, for them, she's a very sacred lady. They revere her so much as Catholics do. And that's why they have not destroyed her shrine, which we have down in the valley. Today, we have a beautiful work, the first work of Antonio Barnucci. We call it the Church of All Nations, because 17 countries donated money for the building of this church. One of them is the United States. When we step inside the church, on the right side, the first dome, you'll be able to see 2 medallions with an eagle within them and the flag of the United States, the emblem of the United States. You'll be able to see it over there. We move all the way inside the church. Windows are alabaster, translucent, but we stain them, they colored them, so there is a minimum amount of light going in. When you go in, it's dark. Luke said that when Jesus was arrested, darkness covered earth. At the back, there's the altar. In front of the altar, there's the rock surrounded with a crown of thorns, and then 3 beautiful mosaics. The one in the middle, Jesus praying. The one on the right side, they came to ask, when they came to arrest him, they asked, who's Jesus? Twice he answered, it is I. The one on the left, it is the kiss of a betrayer. In our country, it is tradition to shake hands or to hug each other, and if he's your master, you kiss him on the right shoulder. That's what Jesus did, and that was the sign where Jesus was arrested and then taken all the way up to Mount Zion to the high priest palaces at that time. That is the area which we call Garden of Gethsemane.
Stay here and keep watch with me. The hour has come. Stay here and keep watch with me. Watch and pray. Stay here and keep watch with me. The hour has come. Stay here and keep watch with me. Watch and pray. Stay here and keep watch with me. With sorrows come. Stay here and keep watch with me. Watch and pray. Stay here and keep watch with me. The hour has come. Stay here and keep watch with me. Watch and pray. Stay here and keep watch with me. If it is possible, stay here and keep watch with me. Watch and pray. Stay here and keep watch with me. The hour has come. Stay here and keep watch with me. Watch and pray. Stay here and keep watch with me. The hour has come. Stay here and keep watch with me. And your guilty brain. Stay here and keep watch with me. The hour has come. Stay here and keep watch with me. Watch and pray down.
Watch your head as we step into the Ethiopian complex of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre.
Lord Jesus, as we remind ourselves of the deep grief that your mother and disciples experienced at placing your body in this tomb, we experience that grief ourselves. But as we experience that grief, we also experience the tremendous love that you have for us. And again, we express gratitude. Allow us to be overwhelmed by that love and to carry that love in our hearts to all the places that we will go forth from this tomb.
This is my body, which will be given up for you. This is the cup of my blood, the blood of the new and everlasting covenant. It will be shed for you and for all, so that sins may be forgiven. Do this in memory of me.
within it, 2 chambers. The first room, we call it the chamber of the angel. That's where we have the round stone. That's where the women have seen the angel sitting on the stone. Told her, the one which you're looking for is not here. He is risen. In the first chapel, you're going to see a marble stand with 2 candles on it. Within that marble stand, we have a piece of stone, a piece of limestone, which is part of the round stone which have covered the entrance of the tomb of Jesus. The second room, you have to bow down. As you enter, on the right side you're going to see a bench. That is where the body of Jesus lied on. It is not the same stone, it is covered up today to protect the original one. But that is the place where the body of Jesus was lying down. As you go to the second room, at the back part of the tomb there's a rectangular icon of the Virgin Mary with a silver hand. Open it, and you'll be able to touch part of the original tomb. Okay. This is right now the chapel within the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, as well as the building which is behind us over here. But the most important thing about their chapel, that is where you can go on and touch another portion of the original tomb. But this time, you'll be touching the back part of the bench on where Jesus Christ's body had been laid down. The point which you'll be touching is basically where the head was lying down.